Yes, indeed. Those gentlemen are joining us now. Honorable Ray Emana, Secretary to the People's Democratic Party in Imo State, as well as Mr. Dennis Amakwe, former Assistant Director with State Security Services. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Good morning.
Let me start with you, Honorable Emana. Give us a sense of what's going on, where you are now, because not one, but twice. Many just wonder, what next? What's the feeling at the moment about what's going on in the States?
Well, there is a sense of inertia, shock. People are amazed. People are just like waking up from a bad dream. Is it really possible? Did this actually happen? Is it possible on earth that the highest security fortress in Imo State, where there is a seat of government, the headquarters of the Nigerian Police, Correctional Service, where the brigade commander lives, tactical commands of the security agencies, about 6-7 of them are situated, where there's the police barracks, where top police personnel live, where the government house is the next neighbor and the correctional center on the other side of the same environment, where you have within the same scenario over 13 commercial banks with the full complements of policemen and security men providing security around those commercial banks, where you have the 34th Artillery Brigade, 15 minutes drive to the seat of government, where you have the Nigerian Air Force, 20 minutes drive to get to the seat of power. And this thing happened within hours. Nothing happened. Nobody challenged them. No reinforcements came. For hours, people in the whole residence of Owerri were on, it was like an earthquake was taking place. And people were asking, and nobody had an answer, and nobody could say what was actually happening. We are saying that no lives were lost. That may be true by the facts available. But I tell you, a lot of people are hospitalized, arising from shock. Those who have high blood pressure, many of them have been affected now. And as I speak to you, in the whole of the Imo State, in the past 72 hours, you can't cite any security operatives anywhere. So there is palpable fear, tension, and this pending phobia that sooner than later, something worse can happen. That is the present mood and environment that exists and pervades in Owerri, Imo State capital. It's a shock. Everybody is in shock. Tell me, how come this could happen with all the guns wielding personal security, with the facility to call for enforcement? And everybody was like everybody took sleeping pills and went to bed and allowed these hoodlums. For us, this is not an attack on anybody, on the government, as they want to say. This is an attack on the very fabric of Imo State. It's an attack on the people. For me, it is a coup against Imo citizens. We are in a state of shock. And Imo people are waiting for explanation. What we want to hear, unfortunately, what we are hearing are things that don't make sense. Political opposition. Who are the opposition? Is it PDP and the secretary of PDP? I have no catapult. All I have are the instruments of democracy, voicing out my opposition. Is it within APC? Because we know in APC there are oppositions in opposition in APC. Which faction of APC is responsible for this? If it is police, if it is politically motivated. Now, is it also the question we should ask ourselves? Primarily is who did this thing, and how come this was able to allow to? There was a big failure of intelligence. Who are those responsible? In other crimes by now, would have had people being dismissed, mass resignations, and we are here, political opposition, those politicians. Soon after this, there have been several other incidents. Most police stations in Imo State are deserted. Policemen are running away from duty for fear of their lives. Of course, you know that the men and women of the Nigerian police are ill-motivated, ill-equipped, ill-trained. it is a disaster.
Well, you know,
We
yeah, just, I mean, yes, unfortunately, there was a lifeless body, which they say was as a result of stampede in the area. But those questions are valid in terms of what really happened, how did it happen, who's responsible. Let's bring in Mr. Makori on this one. He's formerly with the intelligence community. I think he still keeps tabs with them. Well, Mr. Makori, those are the big questions because there's word out there that there should have been some intelligence. So tell us, so from what your analysis or impression is, could there have been an absence of intelligence or somebody didn't do something somewhere?
Well, there is enough intelligence, enough actionable intelligence, actionable in the sense that it allows for space for people to execute it 1 week ahead of this particular event, and then, of course, 72 hours before the event, and then, of course, 48 hours before the event. So 3 times the Nigeria police was informed by the DSS that this is going to happen because, of course, some suspects that are being geolocated around the area were found surveilling the prisons and the police headquarters. But you know, in a lackadaisical way, when the intelligence will come, they throw it by the side, and then, of course, when something happens, then everybody runs around. Number one, of course, the prison the correctional center is not well situated. It has its own problems, and then maybe we can talk about that later.
In terms of the level of intelligence here, yes, you say the police were, but we also understand, what about the security detail attached to the government? Could they also have gleaned from some of this intelligence? Do they usually pass it on to them so that they will be aware, and in case maybe the other security outfits miss it, then they communicate?
The actioning party is actually the police, because when they say, okay, a particular installation or facility is being under threat, then the actionable party will go ahead and correct it. But for details, for security details, they will have intelligence that pertains to the executive protection, that is, the safety of the governor himself. You know, but for that particular facility, I think it was the police.
Does that mean that the DSS cannot action anything or doesn't action any activity at all?
The DSS is not a fighting force. They have a protective department that is basically responsible for the security of persons, VIPs, very important persons. But when it comes to fighting, that's why they always liaise with what they call sister agencies, either the police or the military.
But, you know, this happened like 2 days back to back, and it's not the first. We also understand from information in public domain that this has happened like 5 times within 3 months or thereabouts. Is this still a problem of intelligence, or are some people not just doing their jobs?
Well, I think some people are just too lazy to do their job because right now, in fact, let me put it this way. Lagos, the same intelligence had been coming around, and of course they are proactive in the sense that, oh, if this is, remember, we'll be saying this on TV. If it is happening in the northeast, it could happen in Lagos. And many people, oh, Lagos is too far away, nothing will happen. It came to the middle belt. From there, it moved to the southwest, and now we're in the southeast. And Lagos itself have taken proactive steps right now, especially when it comes to securing correctional facilities in the state. And I think that's what other states should follow now, because they can't sit back and wait until it happens to them.
Okay, let's take this back to Honorable Emiana in Owerri. I mean, you're right there on ground, and this is not the first time this has happened. In fact, over the past 2 months, we've had 5 different attacks. We just had another one after this recent one on the police headquarters and the custodial center. There was another attack on a police facility in Imo State. So we've had 6 of them, an upgrade release of inmates. And for the governor, I mean, like you referenced, he said that this is a plot by a group of aggrieved politicians to destabilize the government of the APC. And he says he has done some thorough investigation and he has credible lead on sponsors of the hoodlums. So there has been a trend here. The governor believes that this is the work of aggrieved politicians. What do you expect to follow this sort of statement?
Well, I think I see a very unfortunate scenario emerging here, because all patriotic Imolites should be asking some specific questions. And if the governor is sure that this is the work of politicians, I expect the governor and the security agencies to immediately move in and arrest such politicians and arraign them before the courts of competent jurisdiction. But I tell you, that is not the case. Let us concede, but let us accept, but not concede that this is the work of a few politicians. How come it was possible? How come it happened in the first instance? Why is it? And it is not just now. It's not a singular incident. It is ongoing. It has been happening. It is still happening. And yet we know the perpetrators and we are keeping quiet. And when you say it's the handwork of opposition, which opposition? Is it the APC opposition? Because the greatest opposition we have against this government is APC within APC. Or is it PDP? Well, the state government says it's opposition, politicians. The former IG said it was IPOP. How come within such a short period we're able to conclude who at this side? Which means at the initial, we knew that and refused to do anything about that. But let me tell you, this is clearly a fail of governance. Pure, simple. Some people have failed in their duties. Some people there's a complete loss of confidence in the security agencies, in the government of the day, and in everything about this APC specific. I want us to be honest. I want the federal government to come out clean and accept that corruption. And because it's not, Imo State is not isolated. Unfortunately, Imo State is involved. But Imo State is known for, has been known as one of the most peaceful cities, states in Nigeria, right from the time of empire. Unfortunately, in the recent past, all this story, the youths are not being employed. That's Imo State has been rated by the Nigerian Board of Statistics Agency. They have rated Imo State as the unemployment capital of Nigeria. Is the government addressing that? Is unemployment not a panacea, a veritable variable for criminality? When a state is declared by an APC government Board of Statistics that Imo State is the unemployment capital of Nigeria, and if the 56% of Imo youths are unemployed, and we're talking about politicians.
Right, so for you, you don't agree that this is the work of aggrieved politicians, right?
I completely disagree at profiling anybody. My take is that a responsible government, realizing the mayhem that took place in Imo State, will go into introspection. Take time to ask itself a soul-searching question. How come this was able to happen? Who are those responsible?
Okay.
Within
Honorable.
and without. Let me tell you, from what happened, if you are in the world, and you know where we are talking about, you know that this couldn't have happened without some measure of complicity, without some measure high level of incompetence, without some people, without complete relation and abandonment of duty. These are basic facts. The government should be asking questions and not to come and try to profile. It is the cheapest thing to do political opponents. This is a criminal act by criminals. If a politician is involved, he should be treated like a criminal. But not to say, when you say politician, I'm a politician. I'm in no position. Am
Well,
I the person involved?
Honorable, I understand your
I'm saying
position.
that both the IGP
Right.
who came up overnight without any investigation said it was IPOB was wrong. If you knew what have you gone into forensic examination of ammunitions used, no arrests have been made, and you have concluded that they are politicians, they are IPOB, you don't know whether they are politicians, whether it's IPOB
Well,
or
Honorable,
ESN
I
or
certainly
foreign
understand.
You don't know.
I understand your position, because reading aggrieved politicians or hearing the governor say that, for some people, they just see that as the PDP. So I understand your position. But let's bring this back to Lagos and speak with Mr. Makri. I mean, listening to Honorable and seeing the positioning of the custodial center, the state headquarters of the Nigeria Police, I mean, that should be one of the most guarded facilities in the state, and which is not far from the government house, about 350 meters. So seeing that positioning on the one hand, but hearing the former IGP saying that preliminary investigations revealed that the attackers who came with different weapons are members of the proscribed IPOB, an Eastern Security Network. And listening to the governor yesterday saying that it's not about IPOB. Said, yes, we agree, we have aggrieved IPOB members, but I can tell you those who are doing this destruction, most of them were brought in from outside Imo State. And he says there's been thorough investigation, and he thinks aggrieved politicians are at work here. Why the dissonance, really?
Well, I actually listened to the governor's speech, and he's correct in the sense that there is investigation still going on. I'm very, very sure that he's very aware of some of the root causes and the people that are involved. Because I know that the security agencies are feeding him with reports as they go along. But like he said, until the investigations are completed, we cannot go ahead and start making assumptions. That's why I was very worried about the former IG's statement that it was IPOB, because there is no evidence to support that. Even if it is IPOB, the evidence should support. That's what we've always been saying. If there is an investigation, it is put in place to gather information which can be used in prosecution. But when you come out and make a political statement or just off the head kind of statement, it becomes a problem. So that is on one side. Now, everybody is saying that that facility, and including the government house and the police station and banks and everywhere, those areas are very, very, that's part of
why so many are asking those questions, if they say preliminary investigations. But I understand Makwe has got a question for you as well. Go ahead, Makwe.
Indeed, I have two questions, one for Honorable Emana and one for Mr. Dennis Amakri. But let me start with Mr. Emana. First, Honorable Emana, the first thing that came out in the very first submission he made on the program about the mood of the people in Imo State and the fact that everybody was surprised and shocked that such a thing could happen in the state, seemed to say that, he saw this beyond party lines, and that, first and foremost, the state needed to be put first. I'm just wondering, barring the statement of yesterday coming from the governor, which seems to have annoyed him a bit, I mean, from the submissions he's put forward later on, you do sound a bit annoyed, sir. However, before that time, did you think that just to send a message home that this is beyond politics, this is about the very fabric of Imo State, and this is about the government, well, when I mean government, not just the people in power right now, but in terms of authority, the fabric of authority being assaulted, and the people of Imo State as well, by extension. Do you think that there will be some move by your party, other parties, to reach out to the government to say, we have a big problem on our hands, how can we help?
So at this critical period, a responsibility. The problem we have in Imo State is that everything is politicized. And the government will have in Imo State, considering the circumstances of this emergency, sees every critical comment as wanting to take over or drive them out of power. But as politicians, we are also citizens of the state. And what has happened, the people, the entire population of Imo State, less than 10% are politicians. The issue should be, the government should have taken some time to reach out and summon an emergency stakeholders meeting, not APC stakeholders meeting. The problem we have in Imo State today is the heightened of state institutions, but tribalizing governance into APC to the nonsense. Look, as I speak to you, I'm under persecution by the state government because I say things they don't like. My properties, wherever I have things concerning my person, the government would rather do the illegal thing to ensure that I get punished because I'm a member of PDP. So going forward, it is unfortunate, and I know our governor, he should be more intelligent than this. People who are patriotism and may not be doing the right thing. What needs to be done here is to ask critical questions. How come this happened? Who did this thing? And why would the situation arise in the first instance where we have 56% of unemployed youths in the state? How in every state society, how will a state be governed? How will a state be stable without a high level of criminality?
Sam,
when
I have to interrupt you because we have to go on break. I will certainly ask a follow-up to that question, when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Well, indeed, we're still talking about the attacks that happened in Imo State, and we have with us Honorable Emana, who is in the PDP in Imo State. Just before we went on break, you were answering the question as to why it was going to be a bit difficult to reach out to the Imo State government because you also believe that this is beyond the attacks happening in Imo are beyond politics. But I'm wondering, I mean, you have said how personally you are being persecuted over your comments in the past. But saying that you see that this is beyond politics, do you think anything can be done to make, to bring government to the table or to help government realize, and the people as well, realize that this is not about partisan politics, this is about the very soul of Imo State? What are your thoughts in that direction?
Thank you very much. I think going forward, let us try and do the right thing. One of the right things to do is that the governor of Imo State should sack his special advisor on security for failing to anticipate this development and not to share, not to blame game. The commissioner of police, the brigade commander, the director of
Oh dear, I'm afraid that the connection seems to be very poor. We can hardly hear you. While we work on that to see if we can re-establish connection and see if we can get better audio, let me come to Mr. Makri. Mr. Makri, you have said that there was actionable intelligence 7 days before, at least a week before, 48 hours before, that something could have been done about this, and that there was word that there was going to be an attack on the facilities. But when we link that up, because the reason you gave was that there was some surveillance, by some people who had their members in the prisons. I want to be sure that that was what I heard.
Not in the prison, but outside the prison. They have observed these people that have been surveilling the prison and then, of course, the police headquarters. Now, one thing about this, the location is even very bad. Because for a correctional facility, the static security is very, very poor. Very, very poor in the sense that it is easily accessible. There is no defensible, what we call defensible space. whereby you have to go through some hurdles before you get to the prison itself. The one in Anambra State is a pointer and an instructive for those in Imo State, Owerri, to have taken enough precautions. And when this intelligence was given to them, it was not executed. And that's where we are. In fact, when I think the former IGP
you say
found
that
out,
this was about
he has
people
to...
looking for their members. I'm just trying to get this. If this is what you're saying, that there were people who had been looking at these two facilities, the police headquarters and also the Nigerian prisons. Were they looking to free their members or, I don't know, that
no,
seems to be what is coming out from the statement that you have made. The second point I'd like you to also address quickly is whether or not members of government also get this intelligence in security reports that are filed to the chief executive officer.
Okay, first of all, you have two questions there. The first one is the surveillance. Surveillance can be carried out on anybody. It can be carried out on any installation. The thing is that it will be, you might not know except you are trained to counter a surveillant. You know, you will not know. But surveillance will be carried out when you see the same person coming around the particular facility, looking at it and passing by and coming back again and looking at the exit and the entry points and stuff like that. That is very true. They picked up that surveillance. Now, the second part of it, the surveillance report or the intelligence coming from that surveillance is not shared with everybody. It is shared with the action party. The action party in this case is the police. That, look, we have some people observing the facility, including your headquarters, you know, and nothing was done about it. So these are the two questions, the answers you were asking.
But we do know on a daily basis that chief executive officers and governors in general and anybody who is in charge of a domain receives security reports on a daily basis. Isn't that correct?
That's very correct. All security reports are shared to, first of all, to the governor in a state. Then it is shared to other sister agencies like the police, the military. If there is a military installations there, all of them got this particular report. So the governor is very much aware.
In other words, well, I think you've already hit the nail on the head that he would have received this sort of information. What would have been expected of him to do?
Well, the thing is that some of these information that comes to him will be discussed in a Security Council meeting where everybody is sitting down, you know, and everybody will contribute to how to counter it. But apparently nothing was done. But you can see that even the governor was referring to that particular report in his statement that they know that some people, that's why he was saying that it is not IPOB. But
well, if he says it's not IPOB, and police said preliminary report said it was IPOB, which security report is who acting on?
There is no preliminary report from the police yet. That's why when the IG said that it
preliminary
was
investigation.
Yes. Yeah, there should be an investigation, and after the investigation, a report will come out to tell people.
So why will the former IGP say preliminary investigation says it's IPOB, and then
there is no preliminary investigation? It might be just guesstimations because within 24 hours he was there, and I don't even think that they were even sitting down there to write a report for him.
No, this statement, he made it before he went to Imo State. And then when he went to Imo State, he said that preliminary investigations have revealed that the attackers who came in their numbers, and he was specific, with sophisticated weapons such as general-purpose machine guns, submachine guns, AK-49 rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and it went on, are members of the proscribed IPOB and the Eastern Security Network. So that didn't sound like guesstimate. Are you saying the former IGP
I think the first part might be correct, where They must have told you that these people came, there were more than 100, they were carrying AK-47s or other kinds of weapons. That's the first part of it. The second part is identifying who they are. And I don't think the identification was made properly before he made his statement.
So this will imply that the former IGP didn't have his facts right, or what?
He doesn't have his facts right, because I don't see how he could have identified them. You identify people by either arresting some of them or, you know, from what they were saying, but no, there was no person that was arrested and asked, where are you from, or who are you? Who are you people? You know, that I don't think happened.
But do you have contrary, facts? Do you have contrary evidence to that?
Well, the SSS has carried out, is still carrying out investigations. They want to, even the people that they saw that were doing the surveillance were not properly identified at that time. So I think further investigation is going to show them who these people are. Because if some arrests are made, during interrogation, they should be able to identify who this group are.
Honorable Emana, you're making a point. Could you go ahead, please?
Yes, I was saying that the governor of Imo State, by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, is the chief security officer of the state. And there is complete failure on his part to provide security for Imo people. Ordinarily, I would have expected the governor of Imo State to resign and apologize to Imo people for failing to provide them with the security which is an oath he swore. But if he finds that to difficult, as the first thing I expected was to sack all his officers associated with security issues. He says here on security. We expect for a rebuilding of confidence in the security apparatus of the state. And to be able to do this, the Commissioner of Police, the Director of SSS, all of them involved, the brigade commander, who are at the head of these agencies that failed to provide security for Igbo people, should all resign and let them the government convene a security emergency to talk about security. Because this is it's not the one-off thing. It's ongoing. There's no guarantee that it will stop. It's not only happening in Imo State, it's happening in the whole of Nigeria. And other regions, other sections of Nigeria are sitting back to protect themselves. We expect the government to be at the head of how do we protect ourselves instead of profiling people and dropping names of opposition. The challenge here is not political. The challenge here is failure of governance. And that is the question. Come with solutions. Request for assistance. Let us all build, provide security. When these criminals are attacked, they don't know who is APC. They don't know who is PDP. As we speak, with the unleashing of over almost 2,000 criminals from the prisons, nobody is safe in this state anymore. So, so the government of Imo State has failed and should stop passing the ball. Should stop the blame game. He should acknowledge his failure, apologize to in this state. Otherwise, what things will happen, I will continue to pass ball. This is not about PDP, it's not about APC, it's about the safeguarding of lives and property of Imo people. And the first way, the first step is to begin to find solutions. How do we engage the army of unemployed youth in Imo State, roaming the streets, graduates, people with doctorate degrees? There are no industries in the state, no viable establishments. Their parents are not being paid salary as I went through. Their pensioners are not being paid. There is restlessness in the land, for crying out loud. We need emergency solutions to this emerging crisis, looming disaster that is this impending doom, this impending catastrophe. It is not about lip service, granting press conferences here and there. We need urgent, we need concrete solutions to our problems.
All right, and Honorable Ray Emana, Secretary for the People's Democratic Party in Imo State, as well as Mr. Dennis Amakwe, former Assistant Director with the SSS. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. We've got Dr. Olukunle Inyonda, who is the Managing Partner and CEO, Design Thinkers Group, Nigeria. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, it turns out that I don't know how much importance or attention we pay to thinking, because it's, I mean, from what we see out there. But give us your impression of how these things you see playing out, how you internalize them, and what goes through your mind seeing these things happen time and again.
Good morning. Thank you, Chamberlain, for inviting me. I think the issue of insecurity in Nigeria is quite troublesome. And what goes on in my mind as an individual is to ask, everybody has been talking about insecurity. What is the problem actually? Is it insecurity? Will insecurity be the output rather than the input? And if you look at what the previous speakers have talked about, you have something like emergency solutions, you have something like, well, it is IPOB, it is this, it is that. For me, the problem you have currently affect who? Affect Nigerians, largely, all right? So, and who are Nigerians? Nigerian human beings. It's not PDP, it's not APC, it's not IPOB. We're talking about human beings that are affected. And if you look at the approach, the question I've asked myself actually is, are we solving the right problem using the wrong approach? Or are we solving the wrong problem using the right approach? Because most times that seems to be the problem, that we have. We don't even know what the problem is. Has anybody been able to actually define what the problem is? Beyond just using insecurity as a loose term. And I don't care what approach anybody have, or what solutions or what intention you have. As much as you don't put users or citizens at the center of the solution, the effort will always fail. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, each time we come up about all these solutions, interventions, do we think of human? You see, the formal approach of designing for people, designing the solution for people is gone. It has to be designed with the people. Who are the people that are affected, by this insecurity? And the way to look at it is, when you look at all your stakeholders, you want to ask yourself, who are the people with interest? Who are people who are interested in this problem? Who are people that have influence on this problem? And if you can address that critically by putting human at the center, using empathy as a basis of the solution, I think the solution will not be far-fetched. Thank you.
From what you've seen, have we been able to identify the problem? Or is it that we are playing the ostrich, or something is getting in the way of us having identified the problem, and as such, we can't execute the problem? Or is it that those who have identified the problem are in the minority and cannot influence? Or what do you see?
I think we are playing the ostrich. The problem has not been identified. I do not think there is any user-based assessment or citizen-based assessment that have actually shown what the problem is. Because when you talk about insecurity, so many things could have contributed to it. It could be the issue of unemployment, which some people have talked about. It could be the issue of exclusions. Because if you are in a situation where there is exclusivity, in which some people feel that they are discriminated, then there's going to be violence. There's going to be agitations. Because we started Boko Haram 2009, all right? So it's about 12 years now since Boko Haram. But after Boko Haram, look at have we solved anything? Look at every other thing that has happened. The issue of banditry, the kidnapping has become a huge commercial venture, in Nigeria. So why are people kidnapping? Why are people killing? Why do you have the banditry that you have in our society? These are things we have to look at. Is it because they don't have jobs? Is it because they felt that they were excluded? Look at the number of secessionist groups that we have. You're talking about IPOB, probably you are talking about Odua Republic, probably you are talking about this. Why are these agitations? So except we look at all these things, then we are just scratching the surface.
But aren't they glaring from what we've seen? All of these groups you've mentioned, different states have one thing or the other. Then there's question about policing. security agencies, the vice president have spoken about that, governors have spoken about unemployment rate, how high it is. So, and they glaring problems in terms of, and the options glaring in terms of what we need to do to address them.
Okay, so if the problem is glaring, like you said, I always say that sometimes the problem may not be what they appear to have looked like. So if you think the problem is glaring, then why is it difficult for us to solve them?
You said you were playing the ostrich.
Yes. So if the problem is glaring, so we've seen the problem, and we're unable to solve them, then the problem is, why do we find it difficult to solve the problem? And if you can address the reason why we find it difficult to solve the problem, then the problem will be solved.
Is it then a problem of maybe decoding the source of the problem? Because I don't even know how to put it. Of course, sitting down here this morning, Dr. Inyioda, I've looked at the causes of, just a simple Google search, I said it earlier. I've looked at 3 different reports. 2 of them identify top cause of insecurity in Nigeria as unemployment and poverty. The other one puts unemployment and poverty on the list. Included in that list is bad governance, inequality, as you mentioned, and so many other things like that. But significantly, if we, and you have also referenced unemployment the other time, if we solve the unemployment problem reasonably, how significant do you think that will be in dealing with the problem of insecurity? I
think if we're able to solve unemployment, then we'll likely solve the issue of insecurity. The World Bank projected that by 2030, 50% of those in extreme poverty will be in nations that have problem with insecurity. And what's going on in my mind is, if Nigeria is projected to be 400 million by 2030, so what's going on in my mind is, if insecurity continues, unemployment continues in Nigeria, so what that means is that most people will be in abject poverty will be in Nigeria, right? So if that is the case, so we have unemployment. Why do we have unemployment as a problem? The question I ask myself, are we a learning country? If you look at organizations today, either private sector or public sector, or whether government or whatever, that are thriving, that are making progress, they are learning organizations. And the question I ask myself, are we a learning country? What have we learned in the last 12 years that we've been battling with all these? What have we learned? The gentleman that spoke from Owerri talks about Imo being having the largest unemployed youth in Nigeria. And I talk about 50-something%. And I say, if it is 50-something%, then by the time you discount the children and you discount the retirees, the elderly, then how many percentage is left? So which means that very likely people in Imo State, the youth in Imo State are likely unemployed. It's not just Imo State. When you have states like Zamfara, like Yobe, recording about 80% poverty rate. So, and when you look at where you have all these problems, the pockets of problem here and there, they are in those areas where you have abject poverty. Now, how do we solve the issue of abject poverty, in Nigeria?
Well, Dr. Inyioda, we're at the final home stretch now. So in trying to come up with a solution, you have said it should be a people-centered solution. You feel that's where we have missing it, or been missing it in the past few years. We have a new IGP, acting IGP anyway. He has promised to have community policing. Sounds like people-centered solution. But in addition to this, do you subscribe to those who say that, there is a group somewhere, something like a Hydra, that is just somewhere thinking about ways to destabilize Nigeria and ensure that Nigeria does not succeed? Should we also factor that in coming up with a solution?
I think we need a system thinking approach, in the whole of this thing, because whatever IG is saying, IG is probably just addressing the one that has to do within his own circle of influence. You ask yourself, you have the insurgent, the bandits and all of that, and all of them have sophisticated weapons that probably the army doesn't even have. So how did those things get into the country? Don't we have people who are charged, to protect our borders? So if those who are charged to protect our borders failed to do that, then you have all these arms and ammunitions, everywhere. Isn't that the problem itself? So if the IG is saying that, okay, we want to look for a human-centered approach, What I think we need to do is that we need to take our discussion off camera, off the glamours of the lens, in which it's like you see the governors, probably they use taxpayers' money to buy some vehicles, and you see all the, We need to go beyond that. That what we need to do is to have stakeholders that have influence. There are people that can influence, the security issues in this country. And there are people that have interest. I'm interested in it. Why am I interested in it? Because I'm a Nigerian. If the road is not free, then you're going to be interested in it if you know that your life is not protected. So is it possible for us to say, you know what, let's take all these things off camera. Let's get, a multidisciplinary, group of people who will really sit down and come up with a framework. And this must have, it's not just the military, it's not just the police, it's not just other law enforcement agencies, but we are talking about people, Nigerian people. We have to look at desirability. All those solutions that you have, from the government, how many of them are actually desired by the people? And if people don't subscribe to it, those solutions will fail. So one of the things you want to look at is that aspect of desirability. Is that what the people want? Or can we get people to actually design the solution? That's what we need to address, actually.
Is that solution going to weigh over and above justice being seen to have been done in terms of arrest people who are committing crime or killing people?
Interesting question you just asked there. I've read, and we've heard to say, well, we know who the sponsors are. And the question I ask myself is the governor or the president or IG or anybody say, oh, we know who are the perpetrators. How many of those sponsors have been arrested? And so long as people are free to do whatever they like to do, and you will see that those who are poor will convince themselves that justice is not served, right? So if justice is not served, then people begin to take law into their hands.
All right. Dr. Olukunle Yoda, Managing Partner and CEO, Design Thinkers Group of Nigeria. Does that mean your group thinks about a solution for Nigeria?
Very interesting question. What we do, actually, when you talk about Design Thinkers Group, it's actually a fair. We're in 26 countries, And what we do is actually to use human-centered design to solve complex problems, and to foster innovations. And this we have done, across 26 countries with different organizations, either public or private.
Yeah, I think the country could do with a lot of things. People who are just there, think about a solution and implement the solution, not the one that will gather, or white people that will gather dust. But thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Anderson Ezeibe, who is the president of the Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics, joins us right now. I don't know why I always say association, maybe because of the doctors. But a number of issues that your union now has raised, with the government. You had gone into a meeting before now with the Minister of Education. Is that correct?
Yes, very correct.
Why do you think it was difficult to come up with a solution to some of the issues that you raised?
Well, these issues have lingered over time. Quite a number of them have been as old as 10 years. And then there are, of course, new ones, that came up. As a trade union, we are not that used to going on strike on industrial actions. Last year, the ultimatum leading to this particular strike was issued last year, as far back as March of last year. But because of the COVID lockdown, little could be done. When we resumed sometime in October last year, we had thought that we had given the government ample time and opportunity, to look at the issues that were raised. Within that period also, of course, new issues came up. For instance, the issue of the governing councils that were dissolved in May of 2020. And you know that the governing councils sit at the apex of governance and administration, for the institutions. Now, for all the federal polytechnics in Nigeria since May last year, there are no governing councils. The implication is that principal officers cannot be appointed. But, by principal officers, we mean chief executives like rectors, bursars, registrars, librarians. They cannot be appointed. Staff appraisal processes cannot be concluded because it is the governing councils, that promote staff. And so, and then, the right level of control, because the governing council controls the activities of the management, exercises control measures over, over the management. And so this, this particular structure is not in place. A lot of the institutions, the principal officers, have been in acting capacity since then. That is not healthy. That's not how to run an institution, a tertiary institution. That is not, the way it should be. In the States, it's even worse. A lot of them don't even have governing councils at all. They operate with obsolete laws. So the issues have been there.
So no governing council, and in turn, because there's no governing council, those ones cannot appoint principal officers. But in the next breath, you also raise a question about the quality of principal officers being appointed, for instance, rectors. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, the issue actually starts with the quality in the governing councils. By law, by the provisions of the Federal Polytechnics Amendment Act 2019, there's a certain prescription as to the caliber of, Nigerians that can be nominated into these governing councils by the federal government. These are, people, who have a minimum of HND, and then people who have, interests in technical and vocational education. Because if you don't have interest in the system, then, then you shouldn't come there. And we have been advocating. We are saying that the system in itself has developed enough capacity over the years. The oldest polytechnic is Yaba College of Technology, established, in 1949. And since then, there are so many polytechnics, first generation, second generation, third generation, and new ones are still coming up. We are saying that the system has developed enough capacity to populate governing councils. What do I mean by this? We have people who have served out creditably as principal officers, whether as bossers, as rectors, and all. You will be doing the system a lot of good if you bring them back as, as council members, to come and give back to the system.
So you also had issue with the kinds of people who were in the governing councils before now, even before they were dissolved.
Of course.
So were they dissolved because of your complaints?
Well, no, their time, ran out. They are supposed to have a tenure of 3 years, but then, of course, we had issues with just bringing any person who comes there and, all he does is to, look out for contracts, pursuing contracts, leaves, the primary assignment, and then violates laws with impunity. We just finished a court case, with 2 governing councils, the last 2, governing councils, of course, the Federal Ministry of Education and the Federal Ministry of Justice, we are all involved. And we are talking about respect for laws. Why is it that you have laws in place and appointees of the government will decide to violate these laws? An act of parliament signed into law by the president, and then the president's appointees decide to go against these same laws with impunity in tertiary institutions. If we don't have sanity in education, then we've lost it.
So those are some of the issues that you have raised. I mean, there are also some that are, really sad to see. For instance, the fact that no polytechnic across Nigeria was considered for the Energize Nigeria initiative, or Energize Education initiative. And I'm sure that all of these issues were tabled in the meeting that you had. What was the outcome of that meeting, and why did you still see it fit to call the strike?
Well, the meeting we had actually served more or less to introduce the issues, speak to the issues before the minister and before the media and other officials of the Federal Ministry of Education. It's not very proper that we were not given that kind of opportunity until about 6 to 7 hours into the strike. So we are currently waiting to be properly invited, in a normal conciliation process, so that the line items, because there are quite a number of items there, the line items can now be trashed out one after the other.
Interestingly, only one of the items it would seem had to do with money, where you talked about minimum wage not being paid, arrears of minimum wage not being paid, and I think some tax issues. The wording around tax, though, raises a lot of questions. it makes it seem that as if you are allergic, that members of your union are allergic to paying tax. I'm looking for the right words now, looking for the exact words which you use here. You talked about plans by the Accountant General of the Federation to deduct over 19 billion naira on the pretext of recovering purported pay-as-you-earn tax liabilities from 19 federal polytechnics. Our union views this attempt as dubious, painted in different colors of impunity, and capable of further pauperizing our members. The claims are unverified, unreconciled, offensive to extant laws, and therefore unacceptable to our members who have diligently and over the years been bearing the brunt of unacceptable tax regimes with little or no social benefits for political leadership in their respective states. If the Accountant General of the Federation says that, certain taxes have not been remitted, isn't it within his remit to collect the taxes?
The issue is, how did he arrive at the fact that certain taxes were not paid? We are talking about purported tax liabilities between 2002 to 2018. Now, within that period, there are some institutions that were given tax liabilities, and yet they were not in existence within that period. For instance, Federal Polytechnic Bali was established, sometime in 2007, 2008. Waziri Umaru Federal Polytechnic Kebbi, was also established about the same time. The one in Kazaure, the same thing. And then you are telling them that they have tax liabilities from 2002. Now, what about the institutions that have been in existence since then? I come from Federal Polytechnic Nekede. We are given a purported tax liability of 2.4 billion. And then, within 2002 to 2018, several staff, assuming, but without conceding that actually, there are these, liabilities. Some of the staff who have these liabilities have retired, left service. Some are late by now, certainly. Some are no longer, in service. So, and then, you engage staff, recently. Are you now trying to transfer the burden of persons who have retired from service, who are no longer in service, by whatever cause? Are you now going to transfer the burden of their tax liabilities to, to people who are not supposed to carry it? Now, and that's why we are saying that it is not reconciled, it is not verified. The letters they wrote claimed, that they came for reconciliation, but no single federal polytechnic accepts this. The federal polytechnics, by law, are tax agents, non-paying tax agents, because they are the people that actually, collect these, taxes from members and remit to the State Board of Internal Revenue, because we are talking about, the pay-as-you-earn tax here, so it is staff that pay, not the institution. Now, they are not consulted. These institutions have chief executives. You can't make payments on my behalf without my consent. The Accountant General of the Federation, or his, privates or whatever, cannot claim to have made payments. Because, for instance, the one in Federal Polytechnic Nekede, they claim to have made 50% of payment already on behalf, of the staff, and that they are going to recover the money. Now, who authorized the payment? You can't make payments on my behalf, without my consent. So that's why we are saying that it's very difficult to, to see laws that support what has just taken place and, what is also about, to take place. And that is what we mean by that particular issue.
So what has been the reaction? Because some of these issues are not directly under the purview of the Ministry of Education. Have you been to the Ministry of Finance, for instance, or the Accountant General's office, more specifically, to say what is going on here? We have issues with your attempts to try and collect this amount of money from our members.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have it on record that almost all the federal polytechnics have rejected the claims in writing because, they were communicated in writing and they have also responded in writing. A lot of them, almost all, rejected the claims. And then on the issue of our position on the matter, that's why we are calling for formal meetings where there are other agencies of government involved in the issues contained in our strike. And we feel that during a normal conciliation process, that all those agencies of government, like the Office of the Accountant General, Head of Civil Service of the Federation, our regulatory body, the MBTE, the Federal Ministry of Education, of course, and then we'll also have our trade union center, that is the Nigerian Labour Congress, with us. and then we can start trashing out the issues so that people will be made to take responsibility, or, with respect to the line items.
So how many of these, issues do you think needs to be taken up first, or to what point do you think you need to be answered before you would say, okay, we think that there is enough seriousness on, answering our demand, and then we can call off the strike, or at least we can go back to work?
Okay, we need the government of Nigeria to demonstrate some very visible seriousness with respect to the implementation of the Needs Assessment Report of 2014. You can't send committees all over the nation since 2014, funded them with taxpayers' monies. They visited institutions. Ab initio, you sent them because you realize the fact that there are funding deficits. There are gaps in infrastructure in these institutions. They are supposed to go and see for themselves, verify the claims, come back, and then recommend what should be done. And then since 2014, that report has been gathering dust in the Federal Ministry of Education. No single step has been taken. In 2017, we brought out that issue once more. We are told that there is paucity of funds, that the sum of 25 billion naira is going to be released to the sector for revitalization, as a stopgap measure. From that 2017 till date, not a penny has been released. So we'd like to see the government demonstrate, a lot of seriousness by releasing that revitalization fund. We even understand the fact, that the inflationary trend in the nation has already even eroded the sums that we are mentioning, but government needs to be seen to be serious, with the findings of his own committee. We want to see a situation where, the New Minimum Wage Act is a law. It's a law. It took effect from April 2019. 2 years down the line, that law is being violated also by the government. The president directed in December 2000 that by December 2019, staff of all ministries, departments, and agencies of the government should be paid. No staff in any of the federal polytechnics have been paid the 10 months arrears we are owed. It's just about 4 billion from our own estimation. And we think that the government can show some seriousness in offsetting this bill. We desire, a government that will show some, more, some measure of seriousness with respect to its supervisory roles and regulatory functions. We understand the fact that ownership of these institutions is found in the concurrent list. But we know that regulation, that is, setting up of standards, is on the exclusive list. And that is why we have just one regulatory body. We have states, for instance, in Abia State, our members, they are owed for 24 months, 2 years. So what type of standards are you going to get there? Teaching, you want to tell me that teaching and learning is going on in that place? It's not true. There can't be teaching, there can't be learning going on where you're owing people for 2 years. And then we expect to have a supervisory body, a regulatory agency that will whip these people into line. In that same institution, in the past 5 years, we've had 5 different chief executives. We've had about 3 different governing councils. We've had about 4 bursars and 3 registrars, all in one institution in a space of 5 years. You can't run an institution like this. It is not compulsory to establish a polytechnic. If you're not ready to fund, if you're not ready to regulate, if you're not, ready to supervise, then don't establish ones. But the contradiction here is this: new polytechnics are being established. New polytechnics are being established. Recently, the federal government established 7 new ones, or announced into existence 7 new polytechnics, federal polytechnics. And then, if you get to the National Assembly, our legislators are falling over themselves and trying to cite pass one law or the other to cite one polytechnic or the other in their constituencies. And yet the existing ones are suffering in serious neglect. Neglect in terms of funding, neglect in terms of supervision, neglect in terms of regulation of standards.
It is very sad indeed. I mean, when you hear that some members have not been paid for 24 months, it's very, very worrisome.
It's happening. You can verify.
But nonetheless, some of these institutions, I mean, some people will say that if you look all around, I mean, your sister agencies in the universities, I mean, unions in the universities as well, have also been up in arms. It was only recently that they called off, one of their strikes. You look in the healthcare sector as well, doctors are currently on strike. So, I mean, the issues are broad. There are many. A lot of people will talk about how, the education sector took a hit during the coronavirus lockdown and the general pandemic. The education of students have been on hold for a while. You heard some of your students there complaining about how their lives seem to be on hold. And the fact that it will seem that the new academic year has started and they're still going to write exams anyway. What would you be saying to them? I mean, they're watching what is going on. They're wondering what is going on in their country. They really want their lecturers to be paid. But if you were to talk to them, if you had an opportunity to address them, what would you say to them?
Well, the truth of the matter is that, and I know that our students actually understand that we've been a very considerate union. Like I said, the ultimatum for this particular action was issued in March 2020. When the lockdown was eased, we were under pressure by our members to declare an industrial dispute, to join our university counterparts on strike. It was the wisdom of our National Executive Council and indeed, some of our congresses that we should, give more time, because of the impact of the COVID. And 6 months down the line, we've not had, any form of attention from the government, leading to this particular action. And for the students also, the truth is that we are struggling against a systematic demarketing of the sector. What do I mean by this? If you consult the JAMB figures with respect to applications, it is easy to come out with 1.7 million applicants for JAMB in a particular year, 1.9 for 2020 and thereabouts. If you look at the number of Nigerian youths applying to go into the polytechnics, it's about 1%, consistently for the past 4 years. About 1%. For the universities, I think University of Ilorin is at the peak, with about, more than 100,000 applicants on, at the last year.
So at the bottom of this, they say that there could be discrimination responsible for this. And right now, lawmakers are seeking to pass a law which, frowns at discrimination for those who come out with a HND and those who come out with a degree, especially, in the labor market. Do you think that could help with the demarketing?
Of course. You see, the demarketing process has been there, sustained by deliberate policies of the government. For instance, in 2016, out of course, the struggle of our union, we successfully saw to the removal, albeit on paper, of what we call entry point dichotomy. What we mean by entry point dichotomy is a situation where HND holders enter the civil service on level 7, while degree holders enter the civil service on level 8. That was resolved by the National Council on Establishment meeting in that 2016 in Mina, Niger State. Now, there's what we call the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling does not allow HND holders to progress beyond a particular point, level 14 in the civil service. That one is still there. And that is what Senator Akinyelure's bill is seeking, to resolve. And we are looking forward to this. But like I said, what is also very key is supervisory activities, the right level of regulation, of standards, because what is happening in the states, they are not offering state diplomas. They are also offering national diplomas. You expect that the standards should be the same everywhere.
Well, Mr. Anderson, we could go on and on. We hope that the issues will be taken seriously and that they will be resolved in a timely fashion. We have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Anderson Ezeibe is the president of the Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics, and he's been talking to us about why they've called another strike. We've seen some of your reactions here. Let's see if we can run through a few of them. Ibrahim Adewale is talking about police attacks in Imo. It is quite unfortunate that whoever is behind the destabilization of Imo State and other parts of the country is doing this at the detriment of the citizens, or to the detriment of the citizens. Whatever damages a cause today would have a negative effect on the citizens as time passes.
Henry Nwangu says, we've heard from both sides. It's obvious that governments in Imo and Ebonyi are suffering from paranoia and persecutory delusions, perhaps born out of legitimacy crisis. Let them convene multi-stakeholder roundtable now to salvage whatever is left for peace sake.
As well as the tweets from Comrade Francis, so much. We thank you. We did see that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the show for today. Thank you for watching and contributing. I mean, a lot of issues to resolve. But hey, have a great day. I'm Coyote Okikuni.
Let's keep the conversation going. Amaya Makinde.
I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And I'm Mark Yusuf.